Good morning, Oakwood Church. I pray this finds you engaged, encouraged, emboldened by the Spirit, and amazed by my advanced advocacy of alliteration on what is day 4 of this week of prayer and fasting. We've undertaken this time together so we can press further into God to learn the lessons of love that our Father is calling us to. Because the truth of the Christian life, Oakwood, is that we would be infused with the Spirit of God and to be perfected in love. 1 John 4 verse 8 tells us that God is love. God is full of grace and goodness and justice and mercy because his very nature is love, and he loves each one of us without condition. And God's love is the highest form of love because it has nothing to do with how good we are or how well we perform in keeping a set of religious laws, and has everything to do with the divine nature of God. In Romans 5 verse 8 it says that God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And as we mature and allow the Spirit of God to transform us, as we come to partake in the divine nature, we too may become able to love as he does. In Psalm 23 verses 5 and 6 it says this: "You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever." When I was young in my faith, I used to imagine this scene like a battle from the Napoleonic Wars, where the generals were stationed on the field, and it was agreed under the rules of engagement that no direct attack would be brought upon the tent where they sat. It was where the men of honour were, drinking Sancerre and directing the battle. And there in that beautiful white tent, I imagined a perfect banqueting table, served on silver, and I would sit down to enjoy the most sumptuous meal of the finest cuisine, lovingly prepared by my father. Right there in the midst of the battle, surrounded by my enemies, safe and secure and protected by God. And then, when the meal was finished, God would anoint my head with oil, the oil of the Spirit, and from that day forward I experienced goodness and mercy all the days of my life. I would sit alone eating that meal, because you don't eat with your enemies. It's difficult to eat with someone you don't like, isn't it? Imagine sitting with an enemy. It's bad enough when you've had an argument with your partner and you have to sit down and eat while the tension is still simmering. But church, have you ever considered that as a child of God, we aren't really supposed to have enemies? Jesus taught us on the Sermon on the Mount that blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. The children of God are called to bring and live in a state of perpetual peace. That's why later in the same Sermon on the Mount, Jesus commands us to love our enemies. Matthew 5:43 to 44. Jesus says this: "You have heard it said, you shall love your enemy and you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Now this seems like a ridiculous thing to consider. Love my enemies? Why would I love them? They are out to kill me, and if I got the chance, I would probably take them out. But what Jesus is describing here is the very nature of God in whose image we are made. Put aside the things that have happened in the past. Look past the sins that your enemy has perpetrated against you and love them, not for anything they are or they aren't, but unconditionally. Because then the reasons you have to hate them will be washed away, and where there was once war and conflict, instead there will be grace and peace. When we love and become like our Father in heaven, then, rather than be at war with our enemies, then we are free to invite them to sit down beside us at that beautiful banqueting table and eat with us, because we are no longer enemies, but instead bonded together in love. I pray that in these lessons of love we will be caused to become more like our Father in heaven, bringing glory and honour to his name, as the world is transformed into the image of his kingdom, where love is the basis for every action we take. Oakwood, I pray we know his grace and peace this day.